before you get to Walnut Creek and so on. And so there was a time we were showing in different kinds of restaurants, we said, or whatever in Berkeley. And then we had a method we had to develop at that time because the, oh yes, I think it was, what was the name of the man that ran the only alternative cinema theater, a little theater right in the university area? I can't remember his name, but it was a legitimate business. And we came along and we were scooping up his audience, apparently. And so he called the police on us. And we didn't have a fire permit. We were just showing in someone's restaurant. And we would have a program that we would then take after showing in Berkeley, wherever, in a few days over to North Beach here, and a bar over there. We became very expert at setting things up, and we even alluded to ourselves as the flying circus after the Baron in World War I. You might remember his very supposed efficient squadron tactics and what have you. But Chick would set up the front part of it where we collected contributions, and two of us would set up the screen. So what I'm coming to is we had a parade of Volkswagen vans that somehow emerged between various owners. So I think we had 3 or something. And they would park in front of the Berkeley place, and if the police came and closed us down, which started to become the way of things, then we immediately had a backdoor place like the Finnish Hall at the other end of Berkeley, and we would get the audience all into the vans, the screen, the films, and so on, and we'd set up instantly and show there. So we always, in those times, we had two places, place one, place two. Not unlike, I think, in some ways, it brings to mind, was it Mars? Who made Les Enfants Terribles? Was that the one? Marcel? No.
No.
Carnet. And his crew, you know, the stories of burying the cameras after the day's shoot. In terms of our exhibition tactics, it was some similar in a little bit more lightweight manner. We didn't have to deal with the Gestapo. But anyway, that's maybe what he was saying, because I don't remember him specifically.
He said he was one of many people who were just busted. And tonight we have the pleasure of Bruce presenting Will Hindle's films. Bruce will not be showing any of his own work, but tonight's a tribute and dedication to a close friend of Bruce Baillie's and many of us as a filmmaker, Will Hindle. So without further ado, Mr. Bruce Baillie.
Thanks, John. Well, this is a one-shot thing. We may not have in this, what I was calling 5 days in memoriam to Will Hindle. We may not have another event where we're showing his films, and we will show these 4 this evening and pretend that we're showing them all over a nice long period, and that we actually have the kind of machinery that the people had who are my fellow residents at Holiday Inn. J.C. Penney is now there, and if I was thinking the comparison of our non-field to their field of endeavor, being J.C. Penney employees and possibly, what is the word? By the way, I have a particular disability, and it affects me in the evening, so if I run out of a word, don't feel hesitant to fill in because it taps into the vocabulary department. And then once again, around 3 in the morning, I get it back. It's too late. Yeah, J.C. Penney's, for example, has machinery to make up something nice like you guys have made up anyway. But we've never had that in our non-field, and because it's run by ourselves, and we're artists, and we have to also work for J.C. Penney in order to get enough money to pay the horrendous rental situation, so on and so on. So some of this is make-believe, but it's 5 days for Will here, and yes, already we've had 2 days on the running seminar. It's all everything that's come up is, how do we say, God, I hate to run out of vocabulary, but I'll do my best. Let's see, Michelle, what did we cover the first day? It was hotel management, wasn't it?
It was architecture.
And architecture both. And we got into those fairly, not completely, but we did very well with that topic. And it's all ostensibly set up, through this event. And today, no one was in attendance other than my 8-year-old. And what did we cover today? It's very interesting. We've got very concerned about the streetcars. It's pretty conventional for people that live here, but for one thing, they impress me in the way they've maintained them. In all their varied color combinations. It's lovely saturation, and it almost looks like what do we call that process? Baked enamel. I've always loved baked enamel art. Like, remember the old Coke signs and so on, and also real art. Using that medium sometimes. But these trains are just really fascinated us. So we've been riding around in the trains today, and that was part of our seminar. And tomorrow night we will have a dinner together, a supper, a last supper perhaps, as part of this continuing seminar. As always, destination location undisclosed. Tomorrow is Saturday, so that no one can call Canyon. Is that right? That makes it just about right. So we'll work that out. I've got some notes here that I took in the last month or so, as my memory would allow, about times with Will, and I'll just kind of look at it a little bit, give you a few, and then we'll look at Pastorelle Bité. Here's a little clump of letters from Will out of my archives that Diane Watley here from Florida has. She went through the archives over at our place in the garage. I think it must have been about 30 years of boxes of correspondence, wasn't it? And in there somewhere is a letter also from Marlon Brando that we were talking about lately. I asked her, did you find that? It's worth a fortune. And we couldn't remember where it is. Anyway, that's in the archives, but I might just, I haven't read these for many years. I might just take the one off the top and see what he has to say to us. I was hoping that I could get my brain in a sort of similar place as was Will Hindle's. He was a wonderful speaker. I don't think he realized it. I mean, he didn't speak often publicly. He was so damn funny and serious, very serious man, and kind of stern. Very critical, quick-witted, and I remember sometimes, like in Buffalo, we had a great meeting, I think for a week, of almost all the filmmakers and so on and so forth. I don't remember the year. And he arrived, I remember, and I was told that he wouldn't come out of his motel room. And so I went back there and spent some time with him, and he didn't realize how wonderful his public appearances always were. And also just traveling with him. We worked on something called PM West for CBS, or one of the main broadcasting systems. And we were, especially he was hired, and I just help out. And we traveled together a lot then, whenever it was. It would have been in the mid-60s, I think. He would quite often launch into a monologue where he played several parts. And we were headed down to cover the annual fiesta in Santa Barbara one year in a CBS car or NBC car or whatever it was. And we thought it was pretty neat. I thought it was pretty neat. And with a third person who was said to have been, he was staying with Will in his apartment at, and I noted it so everyone gets the address right, because it's in my old dilapidated address book, 1609 Vallejo. And this fellow living with him, his name is Jim or some such, and real nice guy. And he was said to have been a lieutenant over at the Army and was mustered out, or whatever the term is, and he had come via the medical center. Oh, he was an MD, I think. So he was quite a gentleman, and he had I remember he had a small suitcase. It was plaid red plaid with a black leatherette siding, and he had several items in there. And I'll tell you in a moment why I remember that. So he and I and Will went off southward in the CBS car, and Will started in on one of his very interesting monologues about the people that were going to be up ahead. And we had our cameras, and this was the only time we'd have any film, and nobody could afford to buy film. Everybody here knows that problem, I guess. And he had his Bolex and his famous silver 3-inch Ektar lens, I think it was. I remember going into one of the stores. I wish I remember the name of the store. It's probably still here, where we used to buy some things and have our stuff repaired. I remember looking at it under the shelf in the counter, and he looked at that lens. It's silver. It's about that high, 3-inch. And he finally ended up buying that thing, and that lens was so clear. It was about an f2.9 or something. It wasn't something like a 1.8 that we all sort of fancied if we had the money. And I shot with it once in a while. We did a rodeo en route, and we'd hand that lens around. But his imagery was unique with that lens. Nobody else could use that lens the way he did. And I remember it would show even on a small moviola, just what we call editor, not like a big table, because he always a part of his basic teaching philosophy was to avoid that kind of equipment, right? So he had that. We all had those little viewers, rewinds. This is quite germane because he was very adamant about keeping equipment simple. So what was I talking about? The lens, yeah. Oh, that was wonderful. I could even see on the viewfinder when I'd sit behind his shoulder when he was editing. Just that crisp, lovely stuff. He used to like to shoot on DuPont black and white reversal. It was a little more silvery and less brownish, or what is that word? What is the word for brown? Sepia. It was that Kodak had just a little difference there. It was gray black and not sort of sepia black. And it was probably a little grainier, but it was kind of an interesting stock. The way he shot it, when I shot it, it didn't amount to a lot. It was just plain, like newsreel stuff. But his was, ooh, he would get that sparkly light. I remember he'd go by the windows in Christmas, and he would shoot just through the glass and the light reflections. And then we'd go home after a while, and the next week I'd go over to his place and we'd look at it. But we didn't have a kind of a fun relationship. Like we're two comrades and we two brothers that loved that footage. It was he was the boss. I always kept myself under him when we looked, because we couldn't get along otherwise at all. He didn't say that, but I recognized it. And so when we worked together, I would just kind of help out. I didn't want to try to equalize the situation. So that was interesting. But why did I get into all this? His dialogues and our traveling together and so on. But let's see what he has to say. And I was trying to get my mind into his manner. And it was sort of happening the last couple of days, but I don't know if it's there now or not. Bruce, to make things simpler, I was going to try to get your money without going through the wages routine. This must be a reference to, PM West. I used to live in Canyon when I would come over to see him. And he was always very supportive of our Canyon efforts, but he never overtly was involved. Well, he says, without going through the wages routine, but now it seems the channel has been cut and we must use it. So I'm sending along the forms you are to fill in and return. If there is any doubt as to how to fill them out, come on over to the city one day soon and Judy will go over the business with you. I don't remember her. And 2, you can pick up some blank forms and have them around for future use, right on the spot. That way you won't have to wait so long. You can hand your time slip in directly. I didn't know they even paid me. I hope everything is well with you, both at Chevrolet. Oh, I worked at the factory over in Oakland. And in your filming, I am not in the best of feelings concerning my work. There's a big emptiness inside sometimes. Can't quite explain it. Hope to see you soon. Willie. And I don't know what the date is here.
In your back pocket.
Oh, thanks. 1961. So I evidently was working at Boeing, and he was working for PM West, and we had started Canyon, and we were doing some shorts, I'm sure by then, and sending out postcards to our original audience, and so on. Well, let's see, right before we put on Pastoral, let me see if there's anything I remember specifically about him making that film from my spontaneous memory. Let's see, what have I got here? There's so much I got to tell you that wouldn't even interest more than about 3 of us, I suppose, by the time I got through it, because it would take like 3 days. There's just so much, but it always is for every topic, I guess. But I've never been one person like one of our former colleagues, Chick Kallenbach, the former editor of the film culture or
Phil
whatever.
Quarter.
His speeches were just masterpieces. It was concise and all the kinds of things we like about public speaking. And I was never able to do that. I always admired him. Let's see, anything on, what are we looking for?
Astronaut Tech.
Oh yeah, Pastrana. I think I saw that when it was already finished. I don't think I knew him before that. I don't see anything on it. And it astonished me, of course. And I remember going to his apartment many times on Vallejo Street. And sometimes listening to the music he had worked with or was working with. He loved music, and he loved that Honegger, was it? And every time I hear it at home, it puts me back to his apartment. There is his famous closet. Remember, I wrote a piece, Dominique, for Canyon Cinema for the archives, a lengthy piece on his closet. Do you recall?
I do.
So that's in the archives, and I refer you to that. But briefly, I wore Will Hindle pants just for you tonight. Now we're going back into another era when there were men, particularly in San Francisco, who really looked like models in a Sears catalog or something like this. And he had those kinds of clothes, like perfect khakis. You can't buy them in the store. And he always had sweat socks, somewhat like these, only more perfect, and then a real nice tennis shoe or whatever you call these, but it would be clean. And this is as close as I could get to that. He had very nice shirts. And I'm not making fun of my old friend. I'm just saying this was one of those remarkable, wonderful things about one of our fellow human beings. There was a Chinese laundry in this piece that we wrote. I talked about it a lot. Across the street. And I'd gone over there with him a couple of times and listened to the whole scene. And he says, let's go over and get my shirts. And so then we go down across the street, and the Chinese laundry was right next to the corner grocery, which is still on Vallejo and Van Ness. And that's where he got his food generally. So they would do his shirts, and they would come back all folded real nicely in plastic packages, and there would be maybe 3 in a stack, and there'd be a blue pinstripe and with button-down collar, and then there'd be one of these and one of those, and then maybe pants, and they'd always be suntans or something like that. So his closet, and then he lived with a man named George, and we've been trying. His biographer is up front here. Diana, you should stand up while you're. Some people haven't met you yet. Diana Watley. She just flew in from Florida just for our show here. So we're trying to find George. We've been trying to remember his last name, and I think it started with an H, something like, if I ever get it. So George had one side of a big walk-in closet, and Will had the other side, and then shirts were on here, this row, and then there were sport jackets, and then there were slacks, and shoes, and so on. That always amazed me, because I was always, no longer maybe so much, but a very indifferent dresser, and living out in the woods and so on, and, so we were quite different in those ways. But I always like to remember those things, and Pastoral, I guess, let's look at it. It's just a wonderful film, and he shot it up there in the hills in the summertime, and we've all seen it in the late summer, how those beautiful black, green, that foliage looks against that burnt grass in the hills, just north of the Golden Gate to the east. And and you'll see when he comes over, most of us have seen the film, but when you come over that hill, I mean,